Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Chapter 12. After finishing at the lab, Peter took a few hours to patrol the streets as Spider-Man. It was important to make an appearance every day, if possible. If he gave himself any time off, rumors would begin to fly. Was he hurt? Had he been killed? The Daily Bugle, back when J. Jonah Jameson was in charge, had been inclined to go to extremes. Once he'd gone on a long weekend trip with Aunt May, the Bugle's headline pronounced, "Fake hero! Too busy for 4-alarm fire!" Now with the suit packed away in his backpack, he met MJ for a late dinner. It was nowhere fancy because Peter considered himself a man of simple tastes. At least, that's what he told himself when he faced the cost of eating out in New York City. He picked a sandwich place just off Times Square because it was shockingly good, reasonably priced, and relatively unknown to tourists. "You sure know how to show a girl a good time," MJ chided as they waited online to order. "You love this place," he reminded her. She smiled at him. "I love this place." With overstuffed sandwiches filled bursting out of the bread, they found a seat toward the back. Peter was starving. His enhanced metabolism required a lot of food, and he often had to hastily down energy bars during the day just to keep his mind focused. He wanted to make the sandwich submit to its new master, and quickly, and he learned from experience that even the most understanding girlfriend frowned upon eating food like a starving barbarian. Besides, MJ had a serious look on her face. "What's going on?" he asked her. She smirked at him. "I feel like I'm in a cartoon." "And you see me as a steaming platter of chicken," she said playfully. "Why don't you get friendly with your dinner before we talk?" He knew that tone, and he didn't like it. "That sounds ominous." She flicked her fingers at his food. When she wouldn't say another word, Peter gave in and took a big bite. It was as good as he remembered. "I'm in at the Bugle," she said. "That's so great!" He burst into a grin, and then clamped his mouth shut. Shards of bacon were probably sticking out of his teeth like broken fence posts. He swallowed quickly, then said, "I know much how you've wanted this, and how hard you've worked. You must be ecstatic." "You have no idea," she said. "I think this is it, Peter. What I'm supposed to be doing. I don't mean in some kind of cosmic sense, but people can have a calling, a thing they're better suited for than anything else. You have yours." Peter wished he had that same kind of confidence. He was sure MJ meant his career as Spider-Man, but she didn't know the doubts he'd been experiencing. That web-slinging might be getting in the way of his calling. And this wasn't the time to tell her. This was her moment. "There are some things we really need to talk about," she continued. Uh-oh. Talks that included a preamble were never good. Peter didn't always feel as if he knew a lot about life, but he knew that much. As he began to respond, his phone buzzed. Peter had tinkered with his phone so that Yuri could contact him without ever knowing his real number. It had meant setting up a second line on the same cell phone, something that wasn't supposed to be possible. But there was a lot of things that were supposed to be impossible. Yet people did them all the time. He gave MJ an apologetic look. "Take it if you need to," she said without a hint of irritation. She knew who and what he was, what kind of responsibilities rested on his shoulders. While she could be disappointed or frustrated with how that affected them as a couple, she was never angry. In fact, she was always supportive. That he knew was a rare thing. "Lieutenant," he said. He tried to sound calm and wise, but came off like the villain in a spy movie. "What's up?" he added. Not, in his opinion, making things any better. "This new partnership of ours," she said. "I need you for it." "Like, right now?" he asked. "Are you busy saving the world or something?" No, I'm having dinner with my girlfriend." "You have a girlfriend." "Is there some reason I shouldn't have a girlfriend?" "I don't know," she replied. "I just never imagined you having a normal life. Just figured when you weren't swinging around the city that you went back to I don't know, your lair or something. Besides, you sound kind of dorky." "I'm a normal person," he said. "I'm so normal, it would terrify you. I'm also very non-dorky. MJ just shot him a smirk. Then tell your long-suffering girlfriend you have to go, Watanabe said. I'll text you the location. Is it important? Only if you want to get Wilson Fisk, she said, and hung up. Peter looked over at MJ. You have to go, she said. I'm really sorry, MJ, he said. Can you maybe say what you need to say before I run out? It can wait, she said. You go do your thing. Sometimes it was unnatural how reasonable she was. Whatever she wanted, whatever she needed, he would take care of it. He gave her a quick kiss, wrapped up the remains of his sandwich, and headed for the door. Then he turned back to her. Don't even consider doing a write-up of this place for the Bugle, he said in his most serious, I mean it tone. It'll get too crowded. Tough call, she said. I don't want to be remembered as a reporter who somehow missed the big sandwich story. He dashed out. Bingham zoomed into the tracking device's location. A restaurant off Times Square. Perfect. A busy location would provide just the right kind of attention. And if the false Spider-Man liked this place, then he'd take it personally. It was exactly what he needed. He headed for the fire escape. So, this is your idea of a good place for a little chat? They stood on a rooftop in the West 50s, overshadowed by Fisk Tower. Watanabe wore a long coat, and her short hair fluttered in the wind, but she didn't look in any way uncomfortable. Seemed like a good place to talk without being seen or overheard, she said. But I guess we could meet in a diner next time if you want. Good point, he said. I guess I don't have a lot of meetings. We all have our shortcomings, she said. Now, do you want to help me get Fisk or not? What do you have in mind? I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what I can do with direct access to Spider-Man. When he started to protest, she held up a hand. Don't interrupt. I asked myself, what value can you bring to the investigation? Well, like I said before, you have access I don't to places and things. You can't get a search warrant, he asked. Isn't that the way it's supposed to work? The way it's supposed to, yes, but this is the real world. Fisk has a lot of influence inside the department. I'm not sure how much. And I don't know who I can trust. But I have my suspicions about a number of people, including my immediate supervisor. I've been warned about freelancing on this case. And if I'm found out, then it could mean my job. So why not let someone else deal with it? Spider-Man asked. Why take the heat? Because no one is dealing with it, she said. I don't know if it's because Fisk has greased the right palms, or because the last time we tried to get him, it was a PR fiasco the department wants to forget. Now that he's trying to play himself off as the St. Wilson, brass seem even more gun-shy. The bottom line is that if I don't do this, it won't get done. But why you? Peter pressed. I was involved in the case 8 years ago, she said. I was just a rookie, but I played a small part. When the authorities were closing in and Fisk got scared, he had to shut up a lot of people. I worked my shares of those murders, and I'll never forget them. There were spouses and kids and neighbors who got caught up in the mess. Fisk is still walking around. That's why me. So what do you have in mind? Spider-Man said. Fisk might have people in the police department, but I have people in the Fisk operation, she said, staring at the looming tower. No, don't get excited. It's no one high up. A mail clerk here, a marketing flunky there. People who can give me snippets of information for me to piece together. She turned to face him. I've got a line of something now. It won't look like much, but I think it'll fit with some of the other data I've collected. You want me to break into Fisk Tower just to steal a file? Not steal, she said. Copy. I can give you a camera if you need one. I've got one, he replied. That's not the point. The file's been left on a desk, she said without letting him continue. It'll have to be put away by the morning. My contact could lose her job if they discover she left it out, so it has to be tonight. You're not afraid of going into Fisk Tower, are you? Of course I'm not. But do you really need Spider-Man for this? I mean, I hate to toot my own horn, but honestly, there's a principle here. You could hire a private detective to do this sort of thing. Gosh, have I offended your dignity? Watanabe asked. If you know a private investigator who can get into Fisk Tower tonight and not leave a trace, please give me his business card. She took a step closer. Look, I'm sorry this isn't glamorous enough for you. It's not as exciting as fighting rhinoceros people or leaping lizards, but this is how cases get made. You really think you can do this? I've studied what went wrong last time, she said. I know exactly what we need and what we can do. If you help me with these kind of surgical strikes, I think we can build a case against Fisk in a year. 18 months tops. 18 months? Peter had been hoping for something more like Thursday after next. If he was going to quit being Spider-Man, he'd been thinking in the back of his mind, that a Fisk arrest was a fitting conclusion to his career. Fisk was the one that got away. If he could put that guy behind bars, maybe the city wouldn't need a web slinger anymore. But 18 months? He never really thought about giving himself some kind of retirement date. Suddenly, the idea of doing this for another year and a half seemed exhausting. Still, how could he say no? How could he refuse to help this detective who knew what she was doing and who had a plan? I'll do it. What a prince, she said. Getting around Fisk security wasn't going to be a problem. He figured that out long ago. It involved going in circuitously, hitting the roof, slipping into an HVAC shaft, tinkering with some wires. It took about an hour. After that, it was a matter of redirecting some cameras and being careful. There was some places in the tower he wouldn't dare attempt to go without more recon and planning, but the cubicle farm on the 48th floor should be fine. The web-slinger slipped in, found the desk number Watanabe had given him, and used his suit camera to copy the 20-plus pages of the document. Piece of cake. A call came in just as he was finishing up. He didn't recognize the number, and it went to voicemail. He decided to check it to see if it was anything important.
Hey, Peter.
It was Anika. Uh-oh.
Just so you know, calling. Uh-huh. That's what I'm doing. Using the phone to talk about science stuff. Yeah. I have some questions about procedures at the lab, I guess. I don't know. Anyhow, call me back if you get a chance. Or, if not, I'll see you at the lab. It's fine either way. Sorry about interrupting your evening. You don't have to call back. Unless you want to. Okay, bye.
Well, that was adorable, but also kind of problematic. Could she be interested in him? He was going to need to let her know that he wasn't available, and as soon as possible. The trick was to avoid making her feel embarrassed. He liked her, and he didn't want her being weird and uncomfortable around him. That was a problem for another time, though. He began the process of slipping out the way he come in, which meant more wriggling through the air shafts. No one's idea of a good time. Once he had to stop because he heard voices. He was about to move along when realized he knew one of the speakers. It was Fisk. He recognized the depth and cadence of it, but he couldn't make out the words. It was impossible to make out from the distance and through the walls. The smart thing to do would be to keep going. He couldn't do it. Quietly, Spider-Man removed the grating from the shaft and slipped out onto the floor. He wasn't entirely certain where he was, so he did a quick scan for security cameras. There were plenty, and they were everywhere. Though none were pointing in his direction, so he figured he had to be on one of the executive floors. There was a light coming from one of the offices, which meant the conversation was probably coming from there. He had to get closer. He looked at the cameras. If he used a little bit of webbing on each one, he could freeze them in place and work around their range of vision. The devices oscillated slowly enough that the security guards might not even notice for hours, by which time the webs would have dissolved. Even if they did notice, they'd assume it was a system failure, not a physical obstruction. Again, it should buy him plenty of time. Choosing his first target, he aimed and webbed. Within minutes, the cameras were safely immobilized, and he zigzagged across the room to crouch just outside the office door. It was ajar, so he was able to peer through. Fisk sat behind his desk, talking to an attractive young woman in her early 20s. Her back was to him, and from what he could see, she had high cheekbones and dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. "This is not a neutral topic for you," Fisk was saying, "and it should not be. I would never advocate walking away from something like this. It is merely a matter of choosing the right time." "That's not what you're advocating," the young woman responded. "You're choosing the right time for me, without my input." Fisk summoned a tight little smile from somewhere. "I'm choosing the right time for both of us. Your father was my friend, and I haven't forgotten what was done to him. The price will be paid, but only when it is safe for us to act." Without context, Spider-Man couldn't make head or tail of their discussion. What was more interesting was the way Fisk was acting with this woman. He had never seen anyone push back against him and have Fisk take it in stride. There was no anger, no temper tantrum. She was pretty, but they weren't giving off romance vibes. Even the worst enemies have a soft side, he supposed, and Fisk was untouchingly devoted to his wife. No, he wasn't flirting here. There was something almost fatherly in his tone. Yet, he mentioned her father. "There's still too much you haven't explained to me." "Knowledge is power, Maya," Fisk responded. "And whoever surrenders powers is a fool." "You have to trust me if I am to aid you." "It's not about trust. It's about protection," Fisk told her. "You win at chess not by charging ahead, but by outthinking your opponent. When you get to checkmate, there is no countermove. I've isolated you from some of the details because there are people involved, and people behave unpredictably. That is something I never do. By controlling the board in such a way that no one will be able to touch me. The press will present the facts the way we want them to," he continued. "They won't even think about criticizing me or suggesting I might be involved in anything improper." The woman laughed. "You'll be too big to fail." There was a moment of silence, and then Fisk let out a short laugh. It was abrupt and violent. Spider-Man thought of a seal in pain. "That's exactly right," he said. "Too big to fail. I like that analogy. It's perfect. And once that becomes true, it will be checkmate, and we will have no reason to hold back." So then she's like, "We'll be too big to fail." And he's like, "Ha ha 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 ha," evil laugh. "Yes, that's exactly right, my loyal minion." It was weird. There's something big happening. Spider-Man was waving his arms around while talking and decided to adopt a more composed posture. He leaned casually against an air conditioning unit, the way dignified people did. "That's not the point. It's exactly the point," Watanabe said. "That Fisk is up to something bad. That's not news. Doing terrible things that hurt people and make him money is what gets him out of bed in the morning. I know that. But this seemed to be of a different order. Maybe." Watanabe didn't sound convinced. It could just be bluster. Or it might be he's about to hatch some new plot. But something that could make him untouchable? Not likely. And it doesn't matter. Because we have to stay the course. Gather evidence we can use to force the issue. And get someone to prosecute the guy. We can't let ourselves become distracted. Spider-Man nodded, because he knew it was true. Fisk wasn't a costumed clown he could knock down and let some mysterious government agency cart him away. They had to stop him legally, or they wouldn't stop him at all. He knew she was right. It still left him frustrated. "The woman he was talking to," Spider-Man said, "called her Maya." Does that mean anything to you? She shook her head. No, but I'll look into it. She paused, then added, hysterics aside, you did good work tonight. I know it's not glamorous, but this is how we'll get him. I promise you. It just feels like drops in the bucket. Give yourself a break, Watanabe said. You're only one person. You can't change the world by yourself. You're part of an effort now, and that effort is going to succeed in the end. He hoped she was right. Turning, he dove off the roof and swung into the night, wondering what the city would look like if the Kingpin's operation really did become too big to fail. Mr. Fisk received the call, then excused himself and left the office. His wife Vanessa was overseas, but she apparently had something she wanted to discuss. His devotion to her was one of the many things Maya admired about him. She stood in the middle of the floor, looking at the oscillating cameras that were not oscillating. There was nothing to be done, not tonight, so she decided to not alarm him. She would tell security and they would investigate. They would find nothing. She took a pen from one of the desks and poked at the substance around a camera. It was sticky. Webbing. Something would definitely have to be done. It would have to be done soon.